Laws are created in the United States in a very public process. Proposals called bills are introduced in Congress, deliberated, and voted on. Then the executive branch of the U.S. government carries out those laws and the regulations that derive from them through its many departments and agencies. Individuals and businesses who are affected by these laws and regulations want to influence their creation and their enforcement. In the United States, this effort to influence is called lobbying. And it goes on not only in Washington, but also in all 50 U.S. state capitals. The U.S. Constitution has provisions in it that allow lobbying to be a part of the government decision process. As Georgetown University public policy professor Mark Rome points out, these provisions are among the most basic constitutional principles.
In the Constitution, we have the right to assemble, we have the right to petition the government, we have free speech and the free press. So when people want to change policy to influence the government, they are constitutionally protected in doing so.
Because of these rights, it is common for American citizens to call, write, email, and also sometimes mount demonstrations before their members of Congress and senators. They are telling those lawmakers they support or oppose the legislation being considered and want them to vote accordingly. In Washington, a great deal of the lobbying is done by third-party advocates. Tim Carney, a reporter for the Washington Examiner newspaper, explains.
One way it's developed has been that companies or interest groups, such as a gun rights group or another interest group, hires a professional, either on their staff or a consultant who works for a firm, to then go to Capitol Hill for them. These are lobbyists, and they know more how Congress works. They know the rules. They know the particular lawmakers who are important or who might be sympathetic. So lobbying today is largely about either big companies hire a professional on staff to make their case to Congress, or companies hire full-time lobbyists who work here in Washington, who then go to Congress or go to the executive branch and make their case.
Lobbying is a major industry in Washington. In 2009, estimates say close to $3.5 billion was spent to influence Congress and the executive branch. And much of this is done by firms of lawyers who specialize in influencing the legislative process and regulatory enforcement. One of those firms is Patton Boggs, where partner Nicholas Allard says lawyers are essential to lobbying.
The law that we're pursuing as lawyers is the question, what should the law be? And how should it be fairly implemented? And so that is why lawyers fundamentally are engaged. And after all, we're talking about the process of writing laws and rules so that they work. There's always the law of unintended consequences. If laws are not drafted correctly, or if they're not implemented in a fair way, so that you have a common rule applied universally in similar situations, you have bad results and bad policy.
These lobbying firms have become highly successful in shaping legislation and policies for the benefits of their clients. Ken Vogel with the Politico newspaper in Washington says that influence is so strong that sometimes lawmakers essentially followed the lobbyist's lead.
Some cases there are lobbying groups that are actually so successful and have so much influence they're able to write bills, proposed bills for members of Congress, and these members of Congress will introduce them without changing a word of them.
Lobbying in Washington is not limited to Americans. There are international companies and foreign governments seeking to influence U.S. legislation and regulations as well. But lobbying is not an anything-goes activity. There are federal laws and ethics regulations that govern the process, and those rules are enforced, though not always perfectly. We'll look at some of those rules and how they're enforced in the next segment of our series. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.